everybody. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Tesla's disciple. My real name's Justin. That's what I'll answer to. I'm from Colorado. I work on cell phone towers. I'm just another average person. Back in the summer of 2012, I read an article in Wired magazine about this great concept of crowdsourcing science, but couched in this puzzle platform. And that really caught my interest enough so I logged on, created an account, and jumped in, and I got hooked real quickly from just the colors and bubbles and the challenge of all of it. So I can't resist a good puzzle, and that's what really brought me into EteRNA, and what's kept me here is just this ability to publish puzzles and challenge other people and be challenged by their puzzles. So back then there was just the challenge puzzles, and it was mostly an exercise in minimizing GC, maximizing GU. So I got the hang of that real quickly, and I was tearing through those, but I kept trying these player puzzles, and I was running into things that I just didn't understand. They didn't fit with this just minimizing, maximizing concept. There were obviously things that going on that I didn't get. So I was particularly fascinated by Broad's small and easy puzzles, and just the frustration of all that, and why can't I solve this simple small shape with 4 pairs in it? But I was determined, so I jumped into the puzzle maker and decided I got to figure out what all these numbers mean. So I turned on the display energies, and mostly through brute force, slowly started to decipher the energy model. So today I want to kind of walk through some of those basics that I learned, because I think if you don't go through that process of just brute forcing it, you don't realize what a lot of the options are in these puzzles. So, so we know EteRNA is based on this mathematical model. So if it's based on math, it has to be predictable. There has to be limits to it, to the math, a point where the model says, okay, that can't be done. So those limits for me sort of give me a reference to use as I'm solving the puzzle and trying to battle those misfolds, where I know this has to be a GC pair, but it's still misfolding. Why and how do I stop that? So I kept tinkering around, and slowly through, like I said, through that brute force, things started to become a little clearer. Like, what's the best possible setup for a multi-loop? Or what's the worst possible for a hairpin? And for me, it's important to know those, the best for my target and the worst for my natural and the misfolds. I want to try and create those worst setups in the misfold. So I don't really keep track of the specific numbers. It's just I kind of have this progression in my head of here's the best all the way down to here's the worst. So I can see, okay, here's where I'm at. Can I make it a little better or a little worse depending on what I'm trying to do? And that way I can help eke out those last few tenths of a kilocalorie to stabilize this thing. So I kind of wanted to run through real quick before we get into a puzzle. I want to run through some of the basics that I found. So as far as I can tell, there's only 5 different energies. You've got your quads, your bulges, your multi-loops, your internal loops, and your hairpins. So I want to start here. We'll start with just the quads. Here, let me get the numbers on here. I guess we'll leave those on. Get rid of all the distractions here. So you've got this stack, which everyone can recognize as a stack. And it's just made up of all these different quads. So I look at it and I say, okay, well, what's the best? I know GC is my strongest pair. So what's the best energy I can get from a quad? And that's going to be the 3.4 with these alternating. And then it progresses down. I get 3.3 that way. I can also get 3.3 the other way. So you can see optimally I get a 3.4 with them alternating like this. But if I flip them, I get a 2.4. That's a 1 kcal difference. That can be huge in a puzzle. And then you progress down. I won't go through them all, but you can just see, okay, GC, now I get a 2.4 with an AU, a 2.2. I can actually GU it, and now I've got a 2.5. So I just keep that progression in my head of what's best to worst, because if I alternate these, now I get a 2.5 here, but if I flip them, I'm down to a 1.4. So even though it's still a GC and a GU pair, there's quite a big difference there in my energy. So like I said, I'm not going to run through them all, but I just want to kind of touch on all of these. So that's your quads. And then you go to a bulge, which, as we know, is just unpaired nucleotide on one side. No matter how many there are, it's still bulge just on the one side. And I found that the bulges don't really care what orientation it is. So here's my bulge energy at 4.4. It doesn't matter which way I orientate the GC pairs, I'm still at a 4.4. So for the bulge, there's the GC, I can go to an AU. Now I'm at a 5.4, but again, it doesn't matter how I orient those. It's always going to be a 5.4. And through the brute force that I've done, and I'm hopefully this will make it so you don't have to go through the brute force. But notice the bulge also doesn't care if it's a GU or an AU. The energy is still the same. No matter how you orient it, GU, AU, it's going to be the same energy. So bulges don't care about orientation. The large ones don't, I should say. A 1 NT bulge, however, does. If I flip orientation here, I'm changing that bulge energy. Whereas with a 2 NT bulge, I don't. Yes? So what you're describing is the Vienna energy model. Right, this is V1, and this doesn't apply to NewPack and V2 per se. But you explored the same issue with the other old models. I've explored it a little bit. I tend to stick with V1 because I don't know if they're quirks or errors or whatever, but like I said, this 1 NT bulge is different than the other bulge, than a 2 or larger. So I stick with V1 because that's just the base that we all work on, that all the puzzles start you off in. So I work with that, but I also like it because of those little quirks offer a little more creativity to it. So yeah, this is all pertaining just to the V1 model. So again, I'm going to try and go through this quickly so we can get to the puzzle. We did bulges. So next, I'm going to look at an internal loop. So actually, let's do hairpins first. Do this logically. Because a hairpin is a loop that has just one closing pair. No matter how big it is, it's only got that one closing pair. And just like all the other structures, I've brute forced it and figured out, okay, what's the best setup for a hairpin? And this is it. It's a GC pair with a GA boost. If I flip that, now it's 3.4. It's still good, but I lost a little bit. And these are just things that I keep in the back of my head while I'm solving a puzzle. I can go to AU and just go down the progression. Okay, now I'm at a 4.5, a 4.2. So like I said, best setup, GC with a G boost. Worst setup, if I throw this GU in there, hairpins don't like the GU. And you can see even there, the orientation matters on the hairpin. And all I'm looking at is the hairpin energy. So again, I have that progression in my head. GC is the best down to the GU as the worst. And I also played around with the boosting. So you've got your GA boost, that's the best you can do. There's also the UU boost. And on a hairpin, that's about all you've got. I'll get to the exceptions here in a second. So basically I know, okay, I can use a G boost, I can use a UU boost. That's about it on the hairpin. So next I move to the internal loop, which is a loop with 2 closing pairs. And then going through that brute force method, I figure out what's the best I can do. And actually, there's not much play in an internal loop. There's only 2 ways to boost it. It's either a GA or it's a UU. Any other combination is not going to boost it for me. So if we take that down to just an empty loop here, no boost at 1.9, it doesn't matter what else I put in here. It's not going to change that 1.9. The only thing I can do is I can boost it with a GA, and that gets me a 1.1 boost, or the UU gets me a 0.7 boost. And those are my only options to boost an internal loop. Next, you go to a multi-loop, which is any loop with more than 2 closing pairs. It could be 3, it could be 10. It's still a multi-loop. And this one, I find, is pretty key to know what's your best setup and what's your worst setup for a multi-loop. I think most people know, most players know that it's the GC with the GA boost. That's the best possible setup for your multi-loop. But one really important thing I've found is the worst setup for the multi-loop, because a lot of times when you're trying to solve a puzzle and you look at your misfold, you've got a multi-loop there. What can you do to wreck that, make that energy bad? So the worst thing you can have for a multi-loop is an AU pair, not a UA, an AU with some combination of U's or C's. So you can see with just an AU pair, I've got a 1.7. And again, I'm not concerned about that 1.7 necessarily, because that can change depending on my other closing pairs. See, you know, as you change the other ones, your energy will change. But I'm concerned about what my closing pair and its boosts. What's the worst thing I can do to that closing pair? And that's going to be a combination. So right now I'm at a 0.7. I put a U here, now I'm at a 0.8. I put a U there, now I'm at a 1.4. So I've cost that multi-loop 0.7 kcal just by putting the UU there. And like I said, this right here is pretty key, knowing how to wreck a multi-loop. And usually it's any combination of C or U. So that's a CC is slightly better, but you can see a CU still works. And the most important base on a multi-loop, in my eyes, is this one right here, the one following the multi-loop. Because if I put a C here, it doesn't change the energy at all. But if I put a C there, it raises it substantially. So when I'm solving a puzzle, I'm looking for that setup. Where's the multi-loop that I can wreck, especially on this side? And again, there's the progression for it. You know, there's your best is the GC with the G boost. And you can flip it. You lose a little bit of energy on the multi-loop. but you can boost it back with that G and almost get the same. So let's see, that was multi-loops, hairpins, internal loops, bulges, quads. Okay, so those are the 5 energies that, you know, whatever number you're looking at, it's going to be one of those. It's a bulge, it's a multi-loop, and it helps be able to look at it and identify what it is. So I want to touch on also the few exceptions to these. And that's where I find the creativity lies in puzzle making and puzzle solving. So the exceptions are the smaller loops. So you probably all know the super boost for the 2-2 loop. You know, it's one of those unusual circumstances where you cross the GUs and all of a sudden you get a huge boost in energy. And I don't know the science behind it and I can't explain why, but there are these exceptions.
No one knows the science behind that. But it is reproducible.
Okay. So, you know, and you can put almost anything in here other than like GCs, you know, G across from a C, that's gonna pair. But I can do UUGG and still get, look, 4.5. That's pretty good. Now you can see it's mispairing. So you might have to mess with these surrounding pairs, the closing pairs, to help that. But it just lets you know that there are a lot of options. There's also the, I think it's the UACG, something like that. That's also a very viable loop. It's a 1.5, that's pretty decent. So you can squeeze that into a puzzle if your 2-2 loop is misfolding. Or, I don't think a lot of people are aware of this, but if you reverse that super boost and put the U's where the G's are supposed to go, and you orient these correctly, you can get a 4-1 out of it. Which, in a lot of puzzles, when your 2-2 loop is the problem, try flipping those and get your GCs right. That might solve it. It's real hard to force a non-super boost in a 2-2 loop. I've tried many, many times. It can be done. But typically use the super boost. That's the best you're going to get. So the other exceptions I want to talk about is the 1-1 loop. Everybody knows GG boost it. That's your best energy. The 1-1 and the 2-2 care about your orientation. You can see as you flip the pairs, your energy, well, if they're GCs, I should say. So anyway, there's these quirks to the energy model, and it offers these alternative boosts outside the Gs, which is where I like to make my puzzles. I like a shape where the shape itself forces these odd, unique boosts. So here's the CA boost in a 1-1 loop. It's not very good right now. It only boosted at 0.1 like that. But watch what happens when I flip my orientation. Now I'm at a -4. So there's that little quirk that could help me in a puzzle where my GG boost constantly is misfolding. But I have to have my pairs turned right. So I've just got this catalog in my head of what are my alternatives? What can I use beside a GG boost? So the 1-1, the 1-2, and the 2-2 are those exceptions in the internal loop. So you can see the best I can get is the AGG boost. But there's also all these other options. Look at that. A 0.4 with the GG, but look at the CG boost. I'm at a 0.6. That's almost as good, but it gets rid of that G that might be misfolding and turns it into a C that might block something else. So I think a lot of people are also aware of the UU boost. for the 2-2, which is another alternative when I've got G's that are mispairing. Throw those U's in there because different pairing partners could stop that misfold. But there's also these other alternatives. I can drop a G in there. Look, it didn't even change. I'm at 1-2 with a C there. I'm still at a 1-2 with the U's. So I think there's a lot of these that some players aren't aware of, their options. So that's why they get stuck on these small, complex puzzles, is because that's what the puzzle demands, is one of these unusual boosts, but they're not even aware that they exist. So, and like I said, that's kind of where I live in my puzzles, is I try and create just shapes because I don't want to put restrictions on it. I want you to just flounder around, trying everything you can, paste it with GCs and G boosts. It's never going to solve. You've got to actually put some thought into it. So those are on your internal loops, the 1-1, the 1-2, and the 2-2. Those are your special circumstances. And real quick, before we get to the puzzle, I want to touch on the hairpins. So there's also some exceptions to the hairpins. The tri loop, I think, as we all know, can't be boosted. No matter what you do, you can't change that energy. But you can use those bases to block if those are misfolding in your puzzle. So it's good to know, hey, I can change those and not affect my target energy, possibly blocking my misfold. The other is we've got the tetra loop, which again, best case is your GC pair with the G boost. But I think there's also a ton of alternatives here because these two will never pair. I can put a GC there. They're not going to pair because you can't have a hairpin with two nucleotides. So I know there's all sorts of different options in here that can get me decent energy. And I can, as long as the surrounding structure around that hairpin is strong enough, I can put whatever I want in there. So real quick, right now I'm at a 0.4. I just want to point out a couple of these options. Look, I can turn that to a G. Doesn't even affect my target energy, but maybe it helps me in the misfold. Same with a C. I can put a C there. It doesn't even change the energy of my target. And there's quite a few different alternatives. See, that one's almost as good. 1-4, but watch, I drop another G and I'm back to the 0-4. So again, there's all these options that I think a lot of players aren't aware of. So I wanted to touch on those a little bit before we jumped into the puzzle. So keep that in mind as we're working through. Let's go to, I wanted to walk through, made a puzzle a couple of years ago called Piece by Piece. And I actually made a little tutorial series on a walkthrough on how to solve it. You can see with all these different steps to kind of give you my idea of my process of how to solve. But I also write in the description, some of them are kind of lengthy and I know a lot of players just want to jump in and start flipping and boosting and solve the puzzle. So they don't read that and here you go. You've got a few paragraphs to read. No, I just want to solve the puzzle. So I want to run through this puzzle with you real quick. Nope, that was the tutorial, but we'll just beam it over. Clear all this out. So usually when I start a puzzle, I'm the same way. I just want to start jumping in and filling out the puzzle and solve it without having to beam to Puzzle Maker or anything like that. But I'm sure you all know there's a lot of puzzles where you get stuck. So what do you do when you get to that point? So here I've got a decent, I've only got two pairs that aren't folding right here. So the problem with these small puzzles like this is, well, if I try and mess with any of this, you know, you can see the whole thing starts to blow up. Well, how do I figure this out without the rest of the puzzle interfering? So I pretty much spend 90% of my time on EteRNA in the puzzle maker, either making or solving and just messing around with things. So we've got two pairs here that are just opening up, and I got to figure out how to get those to close. But the more I mess with it, the more the rest of the puzzle is going to interfere and just start going haywire. So in order to isolate the problems, I'm going to extend these stacks and just cut them out of the puzzle. Fill them in with GC. And there we go. Now I'm down to just this one pair misfolding. So I can focus on this guy. And those of you who are familiar with my puzzles, you know that I tend to find a certain shape that only has one solution, and I build out from there, because I know this little piece has just one way to solve it, and you're going to be messing with the whole puzzle not knowing that this one little section can only be solved one way. So you might hit on that one way, but the rest of the puzzle is misfolding, so you discount it and say, oh no, you know, I still got a 5 kilcal difference. That's no good. So this is my way to isolate that and solve it piece by piece. So this actually happens to be right here, this bulge. And I'm going to isolate the bulge further so I can show this. This bulge right here, with only a dangle on the one side, not the other, there's only 2 ways to stabilize this. So right now I've got a 0.8 kilocal difference. Well, I know that should get me a little better on the multi-loop up here, which it does. So now I'm at even energy. Oh man, what can I do? Well, I don't have the nucleotide over here at number 1 to boost that. So that's the best I can do on the multi-loop. I can't raise a bulge energy, because no matter what I do, the bulge energy stays the same. So all I'm dealing with is a multi-loop and a bulge energy. How do I fix that? Well, like I pointed out before, a 1NT bulge does care about orientation here. So I can try, and again, we go back to the what's the best case versus worst case. So right now I've got my best case up here. My worst case is an AU or GU pair like that, because you can see right now I've got a multi-loop, a target multi-loop, and my misfold is another multi-loop. It's looking at the same thing. So I've got to try and make this multi-loop worse, significantly worse than the target. Well, how can I do that? So and this one is not too hard to brute force because there's only so many options. But I'll show you the 2 ways to solve this. I don't want that stack interfering here. So I want it down to just that misfold. So you can see the 1,3 gives me my best possible energy using a GC and a GU pair. So in the interest of time, this is one of the 2 ways to solve that bulge multi-loop right there. And again, through brute force, I found the other way is, so right now I'm only a 0.1 difference, and I know I can boost that for 0.2. So those are the only 2 ways to solve that particular bulge multi-loop combo. And now that I know that, I've isolated that bulge, I know there's only two possibilities. Let's bring this stack back down to the original puzzle. Okay, so I know that setup actually works. So I'm not going to change this section that I just isolated and found that that's my only solution. So I could possibly change this guy, but now it blows up. And it blows up bad. I'm at 2.7 difference. And there's nothing I can do about that, because the pairs are misfolding with themselves, and there's my only possible change to the energy could be right here. But that's not even going to help. Certainly not the 2.7 that I need. And real quick, one of the tools that I can use is how much energy do I need? What's the minimum energy I need to close this whole stack together? The easy way that I found to figure that out is just change it all to A's. So it just straight opens up. And that's at a 38.9. So I know in order to keep this stack closed, I need at least a 38.9 or better to keep that closed. So if I try my alternative solution, I know there's only two. So let's try putting this other solution in here. But look at my energy. So this is going to be the best I can do with this bulge setup. You know, I could flip that pair, but it only makes it worse. So knowing that 38.9 is what I have to reach to close that, well, I know this is the best I can do is 37.9. I'm never going to get the 38.9 that I need. So I can discount this solution and know for sure that the only way to stabilize this whole stack is using that all GC solution. And now I know for sure that that's the only way to solve this stack. So I can lock those bases because they can't change. That's the only way to do it. So now that I've figured that out, I know that my solution to my other stacks have to agree with this. If they misfold with that, then I can't change these. So I have to alter my other stack. So let's bring this back down. And then I start building. I go, build it back to the original just one step at a time. Now I want to add in this 1-2 loop. So I'm going to extend this stack because I don't want that messing around. So now I can see I still got problems. This stack does not like this setup over here. So I'm going to try, what else can I do? Well, I see a 1-2 loop here, and I know that there are alternatives other than the G boosts. So I start trying some of those. Okay, I tried the UUs, and now we're down to just this pair opening up. That's not too bad. And I'm only 0.2 kilocalories away. So, but what else can I do? Yeah, I could boost this multi-loop. Oh, but look, it really doesn't like that. It's still going to misfold. And I know I can't change that first stack. So something over here's got to change. Well, it really didn't like that. And I know that only got me 0.1, and I need 0.2. So that G boost or the C boost is really not helping me. And here's an example of where we go best case versus worst case. I've got, minus this C boost, I've got the best pair and orientation at my multi-loop. And it's the energy model you can see is comparing my target multi-loop to this natural multi-loop that's folding with this pair as the closing pair. So I've already flipped the GC. If it were like that, oriented the same, well, it's basically looking at the same multi-loop. It's saying 0.7 plus 1.2. That's my target. Well, that's worse than the 0.2 that's wants to fold. So I have to do something to make this, to wreck the energy on this multi-loop that's forming that I don't want to form. So I know GC is the best setup for a multi-loop. Well, that encourages that misfold. I don't want that. So I'm going to flip that. Okay, that's a little worse on the multi-loop energy, right? I went from a neg 0.2 to a positive 0.3. Well, that gains some. And that's what gets us to this 0.2 difference. Well, I still need more. What more can I do? Well, here's where that worst case scenario comes into play. I know the worst case for a multi-loop is an AU pair with U's and C's in the boost spots. So here's my unwanted multi-loop pair with U's in the boost spots. So that's good. But let's make that an AU pair. And again, the worst case on the multi-loop, it does matter what your orientation is. So right now I'm at a 0.7. If I flip that, I'm at a 1.2. That's a big difference just for one pair flip. So this multi-loop really doesn't like this setup. That's the worst possible case. But I'm still not solved. And I know I've wrecked this as much as I can. So, but now I'm only 0.1 away. Oh, I'm getting close. And we know this C boost is not going to work because it just mangles with that first stack that we know is the only solution. So, and the reason I chose this puzzle is because it contains a few tricks like this. For those of you that have done Drake's special knowledge, this is special knowledge 5, where there's another, I don't know if it's a quirk or what of this energy model, but we know that the boost spots for any closing pair are the two adjacent nucleotides. So in a multi-loop, the number of multi-loops or number of nucleotides between your closing pairs matters. If there's 2 or more, see, by just adding that nucleotide, it's stabled up. That's because now that it operates independently. If there's 2 or more, and again, this is the brute force that I've figured out, if there are 2 or more NTs between your multi-loop closing pairs, they operate completely independent of each other. It's when you only have 1 or 0 that things get all muddied up, and you can see now this closing pair and that closing pair, they share this boost. So that offers up some, and I don't know why, but it offers up some tricks because I can mutate this and it'll have an effect on the target multi-loop, but it will have a different effect on this multi-loop with more than 2 in between the closing pairs. So anyway, long story short, I encourage you all to read and solve Drake's special knowledge puzzles because A, they're awesome, and B, they have a lot of good information in it. So if I look just as an example, I'm going to take this multi-loop pair and say, well, what can I, what are my options here that can change energy? Well, I know that the UUs or Cs will raise it, but there's also with this GC pair, we know the C boost gives us plus or improves it 0.1. But did you know that a G there with the GC pair, a G boost there will actually raise the energy 0.2. So what happens by plugging that G in there, it doesn't change my target energy. You can see it's still at 0.7. That's because it's sharing this boost with this other pair. However, if there were 2 or more, it would change the energy. So what happens is in my target, it doesn't change the energy, But in my natural, it's going to raise this multi-loop 0.2, which is enough to stabilize the overall structure. I hope this is making sense. So now I know, and again, I might brute force this a little bit and tweak it to make sure that there's no other options. But I know, because I made the puzzle, that there are no other options for this. So I know that these are now all locked. This AU pair came into play, my boost came into play, my closing pair, also this one. And another thing to point out about special knowledge is that special knowledge 5 works only with this GC pair and the G boost there. If I change this pair, all of a sudden it's not stable anymore. That's because you probably know this, in AU pair at the multi-loop, this is a boost. So it's actually helping that instead of hurting the GC pair that I had. So I also know that this pair becomes locked. So far I've got, half of this puzzle locked as the only solution possible. So then we start to bring in, and I usually, when I'm solving a puzzle, my next step will be, what's the next problem spot? I know that in my original puzzle, this is 3 pairs long, this stack. So I think I have some options there. So I'm not going to mess with that yet. I have this bulge over here that I know is going to be a lot weaker. So I'm going to tackle that one next. So we bring that down to the single pair with the bulge. And again, I don't want this stuff messing with me. So I'm just going to extend that stack. So now I'm just bringing this in 1 pair, 1 loop at a time. I'm going to say, okay, I can't change any of these locked bases. So what do I have here? I've got a target of 24.1 and a natural of 24.6. Well, I'm going to try flipping that pair because I know as this bulge off a multi-loop, it's not going to like that GC right there. So I'm going to flip it to a CG, see what my energy goes to. Oh, now I'm at even energy. I can work with that. So again, I take a look at my misfold. What am I looking at in my misfold? I know what my target is, but what can I do to this misfold to wreck the energy? Well, there's not a whole lot of options. I know that I cannot raise an internal loop's energy. I could possibly boost it, but there's no way to raise it. So I'm just going to discount that as an option. I could put something there, but it's only going to make things worse. So really my only other option, looking at the closing pairs and their boost spots, well, this is my only option right here. So what can I put there? And in my natural mode or target mode, I see that's the bulge. So I have flexibility to mess with it and not mess with my target energy. So I can try different things in this bulge that might help. There we go. We found the U actually stabilized it. So let's look at the natural and see why. Well, I'm putting a U in these boost spots on the multi-loops, which I know that multi-loops don't like. So that's why, okay, now I've stabilized that. And I could possibly maybe use a different pair here, right? So before I move on, I'm going to check, well, what else can I use here? I could use the AU. I can't use the GU. It's not liking, really all it likes is the AU or the GC pair. Anything else, and it goes unstable. So I'm going to lock that U because I know that's the only one that worked there. So now I've got one more piece figured out. Now let's bring this stack back down. It was a 2-pair stack in the beginning, and look, it's already stable. So but I could possibly have some other options here. Yep, I could flip that pair. Let's see if the AU works. Okay, the AU still works even. So now I've got a couple different options to play with on this stack. So I'm not going to lock any of those because I know they could be changed. So my last step, I've got most of this puzzle figured out. Now I'm going to bring this guy back down to its original form, which was a three-pair stack with that tri-loop. And here's where it goes haywire again. You see my whole puzzle is blown up. And now we're at a 2.6 difference. So I've got some work to do. And here I get to the point where, okay, I know I've got some options over here, but I'm bringing this one in. So we'll start with the AU because that's what I've already got there. Can I flip these around and find anything that will stabilize? Not really. I could maybe put in some AU pairs, but I think that's going to make this stack pretty weak. Which, let's see if I... So the best we're getting is, maybe a 1.9. Ooh, that's not bad. A 1.2 difference. So what can I do to mess with this misfold? Because I've locked all the bases I can't change. So anything unlocked, I know I could possibly mess with. So again, look, it helps to be able to identify what structures you're looking at in your misfold. I see a tetraloop here. So my tri-loop is sliding up and becoming this tetraloop. Well, I can wreck a tetraloop energy. Basically, I can, almost anything here in these two will wreck that energy. So let's try it. That made things a lot worse. So then I just proceed, and this is where it becomes almost a brute force thing again, but I've eliminated so much of the puzzle that this is a manageable thing here. And notice I left this as an AU pair. Well, we all know that's weaker. That has worse energy. So let me try it with, hey, look at that. I went back to my other alternative here, which was the GC pair. And all of a sudden, it stabilized. I just out of the blue, But look, I've got options here. There's multiple ways to stabilize this. I did want to touch on one other way. I think it was this way. So I've got the puzzle solved right now. But just to point out some of these other alternatives that you might not try, there's another way to solve this puzzle. And it may not look like it, but I've got a huge difference here, 5 to a 7/8. That's 2.8 kcal. I can actually stabilize this. So it helps, but it takes knowledge of those alternatives too. So looking at my misfold, here's my tetraloop right here. That's my target tetraloop, which I want to fold. But like I showed a little earlier, you've got options here that you can mutate. Okay, 10 seconds. So I just wanted to real quick show you, remember how I said, oh, I can put a G there. I can put a C there. I'm not changing my target energy. Oops. But a little bit. So in my misfold, I'm going to look at those bases and say, well, okay, that's an A pairing with a U. I can block that. And that improves. See, I went from a 7/8 to a 5/6. So now I'm only 1.6 away. And with another G there, I'm back down to a 0.4. And look, this whole branch is now stabilized. And now all I've got is this tetraloop misfold. Well, I can wreck that too. Just real quick, without much explanation, there's more than one way to do that. By using these alternative boosts, you can kind of figure that stuff out as you go. And it takes a lot of just plugging and playing. Oops. But the more you do it, the more you get familiar with them, and the easier it becomes to do. So sorry that took a long time. I ran over, but that's basically my process for solving problems.
Okay, thank you. That's always when I see the players, it's very fascinating. That you spend so much time in the puzzle making and isolate all these things. I'm curious to see what you and other players do when you solve the experimental puzzles. Do you use any of these techniques when you do the switches, or like how do these amazing techniques carry over, if at all, when you do the experimental puzzles?
They do, and I use a lot of these little tricks, but I mean, like in a switch, they'll only pertain to that one state. What I'm trying to solve this one state. It'll still make changes in that second state, but sometimes they come in handy because I need, the way it switches. If this base is pairing with this base, like say it was this, I have a base in my tetraloop that wants to pair with a base in state 2. Well, I may need to actually try and use, maybe the barcode hairpin. If it's becoming a stack, these 4 are pairing with 4 other nucleotides. Maybe I need, a GAAA means, well, I need U's on state 2, and maybe that's not feasible for state 2. So they do come into play. I think switches are kind of a different animal, though. But the concepts all are the same as far as battling the misfolds and stuff. It's just, do these options work in state 2 also?
Thanks.
So that was really masterful. And here's my question. So, we've seen a few other presentations in previous Eternacons that explain how to solve these, for me, extraordinarily challenging puzzles. And it's really demystifying. Do you think that if there is a puzzle that has a solution, and let's suppose it's under 100 nucleotides, do you think that using the kind of secret knowledge and the skill set that you and others in the community, this is a question actually for you, and I think Wawon's online, and Abu who's here, and Ford, others are here. Do you think you can solve it? Like, do you feel like this problem is actually solved to you folks in the community? Single structure design.
Yeah, well, and I know that if it's been published, that it's been solved. So I know there's a way, and this was how I go about it.
But I guess I'm trying to say you guys have gone back, or you have gone back and forth challenging each other, right? Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that has hit the end where if you create a puzzle, then you know that some other member of the community will be able to solve it, like Hoglahu?
Yes.
And vice versa. You've hit the end of single structure design, you think?
I'm constantly trying to come up with, something that will stump Weiwan and Broad and Hoglahu, but usually it's only unsolved if they just don't bother to do it. I think, but that's the cool thing I like about EteRNA is that you can create just about any shape, and that's why I spend so much time in the puzzle maker is I'm trying to find these shapes.
So, okay, well, that's just a comment then is, in the academic research community, this is still totally an unsolved problem, right? And you'll hear a little bit more about that from Epic Falcon later today, who's been trying to automate some of the stuff that you folks are doing. So that's very good to know that you think that this is there's a way just to nail in the Vienna energy model just to get the answer.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But then the question, same question now, but about 2-state design with the Vienna fold model. 2-state switches, 3-state switches. Have you guys you in the community hit the end of that also?
Personally, me, no. I am not super great at the switches.
Yeah.
But I think there's players out there that can solve any switch.
Anybody else have a comment or on that question or other questions?
So to hit on single state design for smaller puzzles, I agree with you. We've figured out, at least for this particular folding engine that we've utilized, we have found all the tricks of the trade for those designs, for those who have solved a number of puzzles and learned a lot of these secrets as they've been presented in some puzzles. We could do them. But what we do still struggle with, and even shy away from, is the complexity that arises with larger puzzles. If you take something complex like this, or actually something simple, single hairpin, and then you make copies of that hairpin around a circle, there's a threshold, some point where you add one more, and all of a sudden, you've run out of options for how many designs you have that can easily stabilize the shape, and you're forced to get really clever on how to come up with another one that won't pair with one of those other previous structures. So when it comes to things like repetition, for instance, that's something that is still an unknown. And of course, for
puzzles that have a solution, right?
For puzzles that have a solution.
So there's some threshold of which.
Yeah, so not impossible design, but for things that actually can be solved. That is, when you get to larger ones, I think that's something for single states we still run into trouble with. For switches, it becomes more complicated, of course, because what works for one won't necessarily work for another, and you have to improvise there. And for the labs, as we use them in the labs, there are other factors that come into play that kind of corral our designs to fit certain criteria that maybe if we were just trying to solve a switch, we could easily solve it, but they would not meet those demands.
I waited till the end to ask this because it's an older question, which has to do with EteRNA's desire to form new, improved energy models. Right? I was intrigued when you said the super boost is reproducible in the lab, yet some of the newer energy models throw it out. Right? So, you want to comment about both the energy model as a goal and?
Yeah, I should say that specific super boost may not be retained in the newest energy models. But here's the interesting: all the quote new energy models we have in EteRNA, Vienna 2, new pack, they're still not the newest. Okay, and in 2011, Doug Turner's lab went and revisited all of the GU containing loops, and they pointed out that there were several errors, which were in our Vienna models, but also in the Vienna 2 models. But even with the revised parameters, which have not yet gone into any of the existing software packages, there's still special, unusual tandem GU, the red, blue patterns that they see have an unusual leave-it energy. And no one has explained why, okay? So, one of my lab's research questions is trying to come up with physical models that could predict or calculate these numbers rather than having to measure them. But so this is a totally active research question. But I think that what I meant by that stuff is still continuing. There are these kind of anomalies that are features of RNA folding. That's reproducible. But Leonard, you also asked about improvements of energy functions. So it's actually, we have spent the last 4 or 5 years, and I remember, Leonard, you asked about this even in the first Eternacon, trying to update the energy function parameters from the vast amounts of data that we're collecting in our lab on-player solutions. And that has still been really challenging. We have now applied the latest, greatest, machine learning techniques for parameter optimization. But that is like, we literally have, I think, 2 or 3 people in our lab are working on that right now. It is such an important question. And the EteRNA data, we now have about 1 million data points, is, for me, the richest resource we have. Yeah. So I think, I wish I could say it was solved, but I do want to affirm that the idea would be, the hope is that in a year or 2, we would have the latest, greatest energy function. It'll be EternaFold and not Vienna-fold or the Vienna energy or the NUPAC. And we'll have a mechanism to also update that based on solutions. So that is still extremely important for EteRNA and for my lab in the RNA community. And when we have that, we will then have a new set of puzzles, and we'll need to figure out the new set of idiosyncrasies and tricks for being able to solve any single structure puzzle. But I'm so much more optimistic that we can do that because of what Justin just said, that for the Vienna model, things look pretty good, at least for 100 nucleotide-ish length puzzles. Yeah.